Actually, you are now in one of the most historic cemeteries and one of the most historic sites in all of Henderson County, believe it or not. Two Edney brothers moved into Henderson County in 1792 from the northeast part of North Carolina, Pasquotank County. They married two daughters of William Mills. The Reverend Samuel Edney married Eleanor Mills, and his brother Asa Edney married Sarah Mills. The community of Edneyville is named for these two Edney brothers. This is the site, right there, in that apple orchard, and on that hill, and all this land in here, is the site of the original home place of the Reverend Samuel Edney, the first Methodist circuit riding minister west of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Methodist Bishop Francis Asbury, who brought the Methodist religion to America, ordained Samuel Edney and remained a close friend of his through the rest of his life. He would come up here frequently every year or a couple of years and visit with Reverend Samuel Edney. Asbury set up the Methodist circuit riding system in the late 1700s, recruiting young ministers to travel by horseback to frontier Methodist congregations. And the Reverend Samuel Edney, as I said, was the first one west of the entire Blue Ridge Mountain Range. He was also a justice of the peace. He also established the first post office in Edneyville in 1828. About 1810, he began a school out of his home, one of the first one-room schools in all of Henderson County. The United Methodist Church, the National United Methodist Church, erected a highway marker on US 64 East indicating this site, but somebody stole the sign and it has disappeared. A son of the Reverend Samuel Edney, named Bayless McKendrick Edney, whose gravesite is also here, lived at the home place after his father's death. Bayless McKendrick Edney never married. He was a lawyer who traveled throughout western North Carolina with law offices in several counties. He was described as an exceptional orator. He was a good friend with many state leaders and best friends with Zeb Vance of Buncombe County. He spoke several languages fluently. He was appointed U.S. Consul to Palermo, Italy. He was elected a state senator in 1858 through 1860. And he was a strong secessionist who organized the 25th North Carolina Infantry Regiment, Company A, Edney's Graves, at the beginning of the Civil War. This is the site where Bayless Edney was murdered during the Civil War. He was in the home here when Union soldiers, using some local Confederate deserters, came up here and intentionally assassinated him prior to the Union Army coming through Henderson County 48 hours later, or 36 hours later. It was an intentional assassination of Bayless McKendrick Edney, who was the most prominent leader in all of Henderson County at the time and the only person who could have led some resistance against the Union coming into the county. And his gravesite is also over here, and this is where he was murdered, in this field. Another son of the Reverend Samuel Edney is also buried at this cemetery. His name is Samuel Rufus Edney. He was born in 1816. He's better known as Rufus Edney. He first married Alphalby Maxwell. He owned a tremendous amount of the Edney property in this community. His home was sort of where you would have passed it on the main highway, 64 East. It was more this direction down here. He was a farmer. He had land on both sides of South Mills Gap Road. By 1860, he had opened the first store here in Edneyville, sometime probably in the 1840s actually. He was the third postmaster of Edneyville, following his father and his brother, James Mills Edney. He was a justice of the peace, and his name is found on most marriage records in the county prior to and during the Civil War and shortly thereafter. He also served on the County Board of Pleas and Quarter Sessions, which today you would call the Board of Commissioners. He served on that prior to the Civil War. He and his first wife had 6 children, She died in 1877, and he then married Amanda DeLola Edney and had 6 more children. And he and his wife's graves are right down here. Other Confederate veterans buried at this cemetery are William Baxter Coston, Thomas Albert Edney, Albert Jefferson Neely, and I want to also point out, when we showed, I had him point to the left. You saw a gazebo and a field, and in those woods is the Asa Edney family cemetery, where Asa Edney, the brother of Sam Edney, is buried. They were brothers. So William Mills had given Sam all this land, hundreds of acres around here that he passed on to his kids. Asa had hundreds of acres further up South Mills Gap Road, the other brother, because he had also married a daughter of William Mills. Asa was a farmer. He served on the committee to create Henderson County. He was one of the leading men in the early government and history of Henderson County. And he also had a drover's inn near his home. Mills Gap Road was an early wagon road way back before the Revolutionary War that would bring you from Mill Spring in what is today Polk County, sort of across Sugarloaf, down through there, and you were on Mills Gap Road, and it would take you all the way out to where Fletcher is today if you were to follow it. It was a primary early wagon road. They quit using it when a bridge was built over Green River to Howard Gap Road in about 1820. But prior to then, it was one of the early routes crossing Sugarloaf Mountain. And that's why he had a drover's inn there, and people that would come in, he would stop and they would lodge there and keep their animals. Kermit Edney was a descendant of Asa Edney, and he put a monument in the Asa Edney family cemetery to Asa Edney and his wife Sarah Mills. We also know the Asa Edney family was known to have slaves, and it is likely their graves are in or near that old family cemetery. When we were doing a cleanup in that cemetery a few years back, we found an 8-foot marble flat stone buried underground, belonging to the gravesite of Marvel F. Edney. Marvel F. Edney was the grandson of Asa Edney, who died during the Civil War. He was the son of Marvel Mills Edney, who we believe is also buried in that cemetery. Marvel Mills Edney served on the very first Court of Pleas and Quarter Sessions in Henderson County, which would be our Board of Commissioners. Other Confederate veterans buried at the Asa Edney Cemetery are Isaac Connor, and Isaac Connor is very interesting because the Connors are from Back Cave. But what happened was the flood of 1916 came in. This old man was still living, and he was very elderly, living alone in his cabin, and the flood killed him. I mean, it destroyed his house, and the flood waters actually washed his body all the way up here. And they found his body up here and just buried him in the Asa Edney family cemetery. Calvin Edney and J.J. Nix are over there. And Buchanan Featherstone, a son of Merriman Featherstone, one of the first settlers into the county. William Mills entered the county in 1785, the same year as several other local pioneer families, and later than about 10 other pioneer families, so he was not the first settler in Henderson County, we know that. He was a Tory, we know that, he had fought alongside the British. And his cemetery, William Mills Cemetery, is that direction. If you go up South Mills Gap Road, back the way we came, you would turn left into Wayne Owenby's private driveway. He's got an orchard back in there. And if you drive all the way to the back of his orchard, the William Mills Cemetery's in there. And it's actually on the Owenby property, but they set the cemetery aside. It's maintained by the Edneyville Boy Scout troop. You can't go in there this time of year because he's picking apples and he's got trucks going through there, and the driveway goes right in front of his yard where his kids play, and it's just not safe. But you can, if you call him, get permission. I know Bill Kimsey's interested. His name's Wayne Owenby, and you can get permission to go visit that cemetery. But he just needs to set up a time and day. The other way you can get to it is Blacksmith Run, that big housing, that big community up there off 64. You've got to kind of go to the right and go all the way to the back, and I don't even think there's any houses actually back there, but you actually have to cross some fields through that development and then climb a hill. And you may have to cross a little ditch or creek, and then climb a hill, and but you can stand back there and see where the cemetery is. It's actually enclosed. The Boy Scout troop keeps it enclosed and has a sign there, and you can come up the back of it that way, but it's not really in the Blacksmith Run subdivision.
Wayne Owenby you call to avoid all that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.